Dust Trail never looked like a town worth stopping for. It was nothing more than a strip of sunburned buildings, two saloons leaning like drunk old men, and a single water trough that always smelled like rusty iron. Colt Mercer guided his bay horse down the main road anyway, boots heavy with dust, coat faded from too many summers under the merciless Arizona sun. He only came for a new bridle, nothing more, nothing less. In a place like Dust Trail, getting what you needed and getting out fast was the rule that kept a man alive. But before Colt could tie his horse to the post outside Miller's tack shop, a sound carved through the air, sharp, ugly, and piercing. A woman screaming. Then came the laughter, the kind of twisted, throat-deep laughter that made even the buzzards circling above rethink their appetite. Colt turned his head. The noise rolled in from the old marketplace, behind the saloon. He felt a prickle climb the back of his neck. Instinct honed from years of seeing the worst parts of men. The marketplace of Dust Trail wasn't where folks bought vegetables and wagon wheels. It was where desperation was priced, traded, and broken. Something inside him said to leave it alone, but his boots moved anyway. He followed the noise down a narrow alley that emptied into a wide dirt square. A crowd had gathered, ranch hands, drifters, gamblers, and men whose eyes gleamed with the kind of hunger no decent person ever carried. In the center of the square stood a long wooden post, sun-cracked and stained from years of cruelty. And tied to that post were 5 Apache women. They weren't standing by choice. Their wrists were bound high above their heads, ropes digging into raw skin. Their clothes hung in tatters, strips of faded fabric barely covering the bruises blooming across their ribs and backs. Dust clung to their legs like another layer of punishment. Each one bore fresh lash marks, still angry, still bleeding. Colt's jaw tightened. The Apache were known for their strength, their pride, their unbreakable spirit. But even the strongest spirit could fracture under this kind of brutality. The crowd jeered at them as if they were no more than livestock waiting for branding. A greasy man in a stained vest strutted in front of the cowering women. 5 strong ones, he shouted. Good hands for digging, hauling, cooking, whatever you've got the coin for. Who'll start the bidding? The crowd answered with whistles, crude jokes, and offers shouted like bar bets. Colt felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd seen ugly things in his lifetime, but this was the kind of ugliness that made a man question why God bothered with mankind at all. He exhaled and took a step back. This wasn't his fight. He came for a bridle, nothing more. Then the late afternoon sun slid between 2 rooftops, landing in a thin golden line across the wrist of the woman standing farthest to the left. The oldest one, with strong shoulders and eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. A small carved mark glinted on her skin. A thunderbird, not inked, carved. Colt froze. He knew that symbol. He carried it too, etched into his own arm by the Apache woman who had dragged him from a burning cabin 5 years ago. A mark carved into him while he hung between life and death. He had never forgotten the pain, or the woman's face, or the debt he owed, and now that same mark stared back at him. The world around Colt, shouting, sun, dust, fell away until he could hear only his heartbeat pounding like a war drum. He stepped forward. The slaver smirked when he saw Colt. You looking to buy, cowboy? These 5 will cost you more than your horse is worth. Colt didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag, pulled out the small cloth pouch he'd spent years filling, coin by coin, and dumped the entire thing onto the slaver's table. Silver and gold clattered loud enough to silence the whole square. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. The slaver blinked. All of that? For them? Colt didn't blink. Cut them down. Greed beat hesitation. The slaver nodded. Colt grabbed a knife from his belt and sliced through the ropes himself. The women didn't speak. They didn't cry. They didn't even look at him. They simply sagged forward, catching each other before they hit the dirt. Colt turned, facing the crowd. We're leaving. And he led the 5 Apache women out of Dust Trail in utter silence, pulling them from the hell the town had tried to bury them in, stepping with the heavy realization that the past he thought he'd outrun had just found him again. The road out of Dust Trail stretched long and empty, a thin scar through the desert. The sun dipped lower behind the red mesas, throwing shadows that crawled like wounded animals across the dirt. Colt rode in front, reins loose in one hand, trying not to look back at the 5 Apache women walking slowly behind him. No one said a word. Their silence wasn't the gentle kind. It was sharp, watchful, and cold enough to bleed through leather and denim. Every time Colt risked a glance over his shoulder, he found 5 pairs of eyes studying him with the same wary intensity a stray wolf gave a trap. They didn't trust him, they didn't understand him, and they sure as hell didn't forgive him. Colt didn't blame them. He led them off the main road and onto a narrow trail that twisted between boulders and dried-out brush. The only sound was the brittle crunch of dirt under their moccasins and the slow, rhythmic clop of Colt's horse. The wind carried the smell of sunburned earth, sage, and a hint of rain somewhere far off. Too far to matter. By the time Colt's ranch came into view, the sky had turned a bruised purple, and the first coyotes were beginning their lonely howls from the canyons. His ranch wasn't much, just a weathered barn leaning on its last good beam, a cabin with a sagging porch, and a corral half swallowed by tumbleweeds. But it was the only place where he knew those women wouldn't be hunted tonight. He dismounted and nodded toward the barn. "You can rest in here. There's water, blankets. I'll fix a fire." The women didn't move at first. They stared at the barn, then at him, their faces unreadable beneath layers of dirt, sweat, and exhaustion. Finally, Sayela, the one with the Thunderbird mark, gave a small tilt of her head. The others followed. Colt pushed the barn doors open. The smell of hay and old wood drifted out. It wasn't luxury, but it was shelter. He gathered straw into the corner, laid out a few worn blankets, then lit a fire inside a rusted iron bowl. The flames crackled weakly at first, then grew, painting the barn walls in shaky orange light. The women huddled near the fire, but kept their distance from him. Colt reached for the small metal box where he stored cloth strips and a bottle of cheap whiskey. The closest thing he had to medicine. "If you'll let me," he said quietly, "I can help with the cuts." No one answered. Nala's jaw tightened as if she expected a trick. Lyra's hand hovered near a hidden knife. Amitsa had the look of someone deciding whether she could outrun a bullet if she needed to. Tayona stared at Colt as if trying to solve a puzzle that refused to make sense. Sayla finally said, "Leave the bandages. Go." Colt nodded and placed the supplies on the ground. "All right." He stepped out of the barn, pulling the door halfway closed behind him. The night air was cooler, brushing against his skin like a warning. He sat on the porch, leaning his back against the rough wood post, hat pulled low to block the moonlight. He didn't expect sleep to come. Not tonight. Inside the barn, he heard the quiet rustle of shifting bodies, the soft hiss of breath against pain, and then whispering. Apache words flowed like low winds sliding through canyon stones. Soft, sharp, and full of things Colt didn't have the right to understand. But fragments reached him anyway. He saw the Thunderbird. Why would a white man save us? Mother once marked a stranger. Could it be him? Colt's chest tightened. He lowered his head, eyes fixed on the dust between his boots. He didn't understand most of what they said. But then, clear as a gunshot through fog, he heard 3 words that twisted something deep in his gut. 15. Our children. His breath caught. 15. Children. The words sank like stones. Whatever horrors those women had lived through in Dust Trail weren't the full story. There was something worse, something that made their silence feel heavier than chains. Colt rubbed the worn handle of his knife, jaw clenched, pulse hammering in his throat. He didn't know what kind of trail he'd just stepped onto. But one thing was certain. This wasn't mercy. This was the beginning of a debt coming due. The first light of dawn slipped across the Mercer Ranch like a thin blade, cutting through the cold night air, still clinging to the ground. Colt had barely slept. He sat on the porch steps with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hands, watching the barn doors as if they might burst open with trouble at any second. He didn't have to wait long. The barn door creaked, and Sayla stepped out first, her posture stiff and unyielding, despite the raw bruises across her arms. The other 4 followed behind her, silent, tense, and already gathered into a tight formation, the way wolves regroup after a long chase. Colt set the coffee down. "You heading somewhere?" he asked. Sayla didn't answer him. She didn't need to. The way they carried themselves said enough. They were leaving, and they weren't planning on coming back. "We don't stay where we're not welcome," Nala muttered, not quite meeting Colt's eyes but not hiding her distrust either. Colt rose to his feet. "You're still hurt. You should rest at least another day." A bitter laugh escaped Lyra. "Rest won't bring back what we lost." Before Colt could ask what that meant, a sudden thump echoed behind them. Teyona had collapsed in the dirt. Her knees hit the ground first, then her hands trembling violently. Amitsa rushed to her side, lifting the young woman's face. Teona's breath came in thin, cracked gasps, like someone who had been running from death for too long. "That's enough," Colt said, stepping forward. "She needs water." Amitsa glanced at him, hesitant, suspicious, and then nodded. Colt brought a canteen, and Amitsa helped Teyona drink slowly. But the moment the water touched her lips, Teyona broke into sobs so soft they barely carried on the morning wind. Amitsa closed her eyes. "We can't hide it any longer," she whispered. Sayla stiffened, but didn't stop her. Amitsa looked at Colt, her voice trembling with anger, grief, and something deeper, something primal. 15 children, she said. "Our sons, our daughters. They were taken from Black Mesa 3 days ago." Colt felt the air leave his lungs. Amitsa continued, her words cracking like dry wood in a fire. "Iron sabers raided the village. They killed the old, burned the homes, the children. They took them alive." Chiona's fingers dug into the dirt as she whispered hoarsely, "My baby, my little boy. He cried for me." Colt felt something wrench inside him, like someone had grabbed his heart with calloused hands. Lyra added, voice tight, "The sabers sold them south. Slavers headed for the border. Once they cross, they disappear." Nala spat into the dirt. "No one's coming for them. No soldiers, no neighbors, no tribe, no one." Then Sayela finally spoke. Her voice was soft but sharp enough to cut bone. "Kung aiku chung ta ka," she said, her Apache accent thick as storm clouds. "Chung ta fai ku bon tre." "No one is coming for us. We must save the children." Something about the way she said it, calm, final, made Colt's skin prickle. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't hoping for a miracle. She was declaring war, the same war she would walk into even if she died halfway across the desert. Colt swallowed hard. "How far ahead are they?" "Too far to reach on foot fast enough," Lyra muttered. "And we are not welcome in any town between here and the border," Nala added. "If people see us, they will finish what Dust Trail started." The morning sun rose higher, washing their faces in pale gold. 5 women who had already lost everything except the thin thread of hope tied to 15 missing children. Colt felt the old memory stirring, a face painted in ash, black braids whipping in the wind, and hands rough but steady as they lifted him from a burning cabin. The Chiricahua woman who had saved him once, who carved the Thunderbird into his skin so he would live. A life saved demanded a life given back. He drew a slow breath. "You're not walking into that hell alone." Every woman turned to look at him. Sayla's gaze was sharp enough to test a man's soul. "Why?" she asked. Colt met her eyes without flinching. "Because I owe someone from your people a debt, and because no mother should have to bury her child. Not out here, not anywhere." Silence hung heavy, thicker than smoke, heavier than judgment. Finally, Sayla gave a single slow nod. Not trust, not forgiveness, but acceptance of a path they now had to walk together. Colt reached for his saddle. "Pack what you need. We ride in 10 minutes. Behind him, he heard Teyona whisper one fragile word, barely audible, but enough to break the desert morning open. "Please." And Colt knew then, this wasn't just a rescue, it was a reckoning. By mid-morning, the desert heat had already settled over the land like a heavy, smothering blanket. The sky stretched wide and pitiless above them, an endless blue dome with no promise of shade. Colt rode ahead, scanning the horizon, while the 5 Apache women moved swiftly behind him. Silent, determined, eyes sharp as flint. Amitsa was the first to stop. She crouched beside a set of shallow grooves carved into the dirt, a wagon trail still fresh, the kind that didn't come from settlers or merchants. These were narrow, uneven tracks, made by a wagon overloaded and moving in a hurry. She brushed 2 fingers across the dirt, feeling the warmth. They passed here before the morning cooled, she murmured. Colt dismounted. How long? Mesa squinted at the sun. 2 hours, maybe less. Sayla nodded for the others to spread out. Lyra drifted toward a patch of trampled brush and dropped to one knee. She sifted through the dust with the careful precision of someone who had spent her life reading the land like scripture. A moment later, her breath hitched. She lifted something small, delicate, barely the size of 2 fingers, a child's bead necklace, handmade from river stones and sinew. But the cord was torn and dark. Dried blood stained the pebbles like rust. Tayona let out a small broken sound. That's Connie's, she whispered, voice trembling. My son's necklace. He never took it off. Colt felt his stomach twist. He had seen the aftermath of raids before, but this was cruelty aimed at the smallest and most defenseless. Nala stood rigid, fists clenched so tightly the knuckles had turned white. Her nostrils flared like a horse ready to bolt. We're wasting time, she snapped. We follow the tracks now. If we push hard, we can catch them before nightfall. Sayla stepped in front of her, hand up. Charging blindly will get us killed. I don't care, Nala snarled. They have our children. Sayla's voice cut through the air, low but powerful. If you fall, who will fight for them then? Rage doesn't lead, it destroys. Nala trembled, jaw tight, but she stopped. Barely. Colt watched the exchange with a heavy sense of respect. Their pain could have shattered them, but instead it sharpened them into something fierce, something dangerous. They followed the tracks over a dry creek bed, past a stretch of charred brush where someone had burned evidence in a hurry. Ashes floated like gray snowflakes, settling into the cracks of their boots. Colt crouched and touched the blackened dirt. Fire was recent, he muttered. They're hiding something. Or someone, Lyra said darkly. The land ahead narrowed into a rocky pass. Colt slowed his horse, instincts prickling. Rocky passes were death traps. Tight quarters, blind corners, plenty of places for a rifle barrel to peek out. And then he saw it, a shadow shifting, the glint of metal catching the sun. Down, Colt barked. A bullet screamed past his ear, slamming into the boulder behind him. 2 bounty hunters emerged from the rocks, one lean and sharp-eyed, the other heavy-set with a grin that showed more rot than teeth. Well, well, the bigger one drawled. 5 Apache women and a stray cowboy. Bounties on all their heads. Looks like we'll be drinking good tonight. Colt reached for his rifle, but he wasn't fast enough. Nala was. She moved like a striking rattlesnake, and no warning, just pure violence unleashed. She closed the distance between her and the heavy-set man before his grin had time to fade. Her knife flashed once, slicing across his throat. Blood sprayed the rock beside him, and he fell without a sound. The lean hunter swung his pistol toward her, but Lyra struck from behind, kicking his arm with bone-snapping force. He dropped the gun, gasping. Nala didn't hesitate. She drove her blade straight into his chest. Both men were dead before Colt even raised his rifle. Silence settled hard over the pass. Nala wiped the blade on the dead man's coat, breathing fast but steady. She met Colt's gaze with a look that dared him to judge her. He didn't, because in that moment, watching the precision and ferocity with which they fought, Colt finally understood. These women were not victims. They were warriors, each forged by loss, bound by blood, sharpened by the kind of grief that could turn a human heart into steel. Colt holstered his rifle. They'll have more hunters ahead. Sayla stepped past the bodies without looking back. Let them come. And with that, they followed the wagon tracks deeper into the desert, toward danger, toward darkness, toward the thin, desperate hope that 15 small lives were still waiting to be found. The sky was turning a deep blue-purple by the time they reached the ridge overlooking a narrow canyon. The evening wind rushed between the rocks with a low, mournful whistle, brushing against Colt's skin like cold fingers dragging across bone. The land below was carved in shadow, jagged and unforgiving, a place where truce had nowhere to hide. They set a small campfire beside a tall outcrop of stone. The 5 Apache women sat close together on one side of the flames. Colt sat alone on the other, staring at the fire the way a man stares at something he spent years trying to forget. Guilt had a way of breathing, slow, steady, patient. Tonight, it breathed loud inside him. Sayla watched him without speaking. Nala sharpened her knife, each stroke slicing the silence thinner. Lyra kept her bow across her lap, fingers resting near the string. Teyona leaned weakly against Amitsa, her breathing shallow but steadier than the night before. Colt knew this moment was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. He stood abruptly, hands shaking, despite the cool night air. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, voice gravel low. 5 pairs of eyes lifted toward him, hard, wary, unblinking. Colt swallowed. "About the iron sabers, and about me." The wind died. Even the fire seemed to lean in closer. "I wasn't always a rancher," Colt began. "Before this life, I rode with the sabers." Lyra's bowstring creaked under her tightening grip. Nala's knife paused mid-stroke. Colt forced himself to continue. "They told me we were stopping raiders, protecting settlements, restoring peace along the border." He shook his head slowly. "I was young, stupid. I believed them." Amitsa stiffened, her face shadowed in the flickering firelight. "But that wasn't the truth," Colt said. "Not even close." He stared into the flames, seeing not the fire before him, but another fire, one he had never escaped, no matter how far he rode. "They attacked a village," Colt said, voice breaking. "Your village, Black Mesa. I thought it was another operation. But when I saw the way they shot unarmed elders, how they dragged children screaming from their mothers," his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "I knew then we weren't stopping raiders. We were the raiders." Nala shot to her feet, knife in hand. "You," she snarled. "You were one of them?" Sayla lifted a hand, but her eyes were burning too. Colt didn't step back. He didn't defend himself. "Yes," he said, "but when I realized what they were doing, I fought them. I tried to pull children out of the fire. They beat me and threw me into a burning cabin." He raised his left sleeve, revealing the carved thunderbird, the mark that dug deeper than any scar a blade could make. "And then," Colt whispered, "a woman pulled me out. An Apache woman. She carried me through the flames and carved this into my skin so I would remember." A choking silence followed. Teyona looked at him with wide, haunted eyes. Amitsa covered her mouth. Lyra trembled, not with fear, but with a killing fury. Nala took a step forward, knife raised. "You should have died in that fire." Lyra drew an arrow halfway, her bowstring tight enough to sing. Colt closed his eyes. "Maybe I should have." The wind shifted, sweeping embers across the ground. Sayla stood. Her shadow stretched long behind her, like a blade. "Enough," she said. Nala snapped toward her. "He was one of them. And if he dies now," Sayla said quietly, 15 children die with him." Those words, spoken with steady, brutal truth, froze every woman in place. "He cannot undo the past," Sayla continued, "and we do not forgive him for it. Not today, not tomorrow." She turned her gaze to Colt, sharp as flint. "But he knows the sabers, their tricks, their roots, their leader. A beat, a breath. We need him alive." Nala's chest rose and fell with ragged fury. Slowly, very slowly, she lowered her knife. Lyra eased her arrow back into her quiver, though her eyes never softened. Colt felt the weight of their hatred settle on him like desert sand after a storm, burying, suffocating, but deserved. Sayla stepped closer, her voice low enough only he could hear. "You walk with us now," she said. "Not as a friend, not as one of us, but as a man who owes a life debt. Until the 15 are found, you belong to this fire." Colt nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness, it was a sentence, and he accepted it. By sunrise, the land had already changed. The dirt turned from a warm rust color to a pale, bone-like gray. The wind grew harsher, whistling through hollow rock formations that rose like broken teeth from the earth. Locals called this stretch Forbidden Mesa, but the old-timers had another name for it, one spoken only when the sun was high and fear felt distant. The carcass-eating desert, a place where storms swallowed riders whole, where bones turned to powder before anyone ever found them. Colt had ridden across rough land before, but Forbidden Mesa had a way of watching you. It made the back of your neck itch, like unseen eyes were tracking your every move. Every step his horse took echoed through the emptiness, too loud for comfort. The 5 Apache women walked in silence, but it wasn't the same strained silence from earlier days. This was the silence of dread, the kind that wraps itself around a person's ribs and tightens with every mile. Amitsa raised her hand suddenly. The group halted. She knelt near a cluster of jagged rocks and brushed away the dust. A strip of faded red cloth emerged, small, frayed, and smeared with dirt. Teona's breath hitched. That's my baby's scarf." Her voice cracked like something inside her had snapped in two. A moment later, Lyra found something else. A tiny leather bracelet, the kind Apache mothers braided for their children as a blessing. But this one was torn, edges curled and stiffened with dried blood. Nala swore under her breath, punching her fist into the sand. "They dragged them through here, fast." Colt crouched beside the bracelet, touching it gently. It was cold, far too cold. "They're pushing hard," he muttered, trying to lose anyone tracking them. Sila's jaw tightened. "Then we stay close, even closer than death." They continued deeper into Forbidden Mesa. The land stretched out in wide sheets of cracked earth and sun-bleached stone. There were no trees, no birds, not even a stray lizard brave enough to wander into this cursed ground. The only sound was Colt's canteen sloshing as he carried extra water for all of them. He walked at the back of the group, rifle in hand, keeping watch for mountain cats, coyotes, or anything hungrier. Out here, predators didn't wait for weakness. They welcomed it. A dust devil whipped across the plain, pulling Teona's hair loose from its braid. She stumbled, catching herself. Colt stepped closer. "Careful, the ground dips ahead." Teona hesitated, eyes softening for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered. Just 2 words, small, fragile, but they carried the weight of a woman who'd lost almost everything and was still fighting to stand. Colt nodded, unsure if he deserved the kindness, but accepting it anyway. They pressed on. By afternoon, the sun hammered the earth with ruthless heat. Even Colt's horse was beginning to flag. The Apache women, though weary, moved with a purpose carved deep into bone. Every step was for a child. Colt could feel that in the way they breathed, in the way they scanned the horizon like hawks. Then Sila's hand shot up again. This time, the air turned colder, even though the sun still beat down. Below a low ridge sat a small camp, if it could even be called that. A wagon wheel lay half buried in sand. Torn blankets clung to a fallen post, flapping weakly in the wind. A fire pit held nothing but gray ash, still warm. Colt's throat tightened. This was too fresh. Amitsa knelt near the ashes, her voice barely a breath. "Hours, not days." Lyra wandered toward a dark stain near the wagon wheel. She went still. "Sila," she whispered. Sila approached and froze solid. Blood, small drops, small footprints, and drag marks sharp in the sand. Teona covered her mouth, but a cry still escaped, a sound so broken it echoed against the cliff walls. Nala stepped forward, fists trembling with unspent rage. "They're hurting them! They're hurting the children!" Sila didn't speak. She didn't breathe. Her face was made of stone, but her eyes were the storm building over the desert. Colt stood beside her, his hands shaking despite himself. He had seen horrors, but this was cruelty carved onto innocence. It made his stomach coil and his heart pound with a fury he didn't try to hide. "We're close," Colt said quietly. "Too close for them to hide long." Sila finally exhaled, slow and lethal. We moved before nightfall, and as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across Forbidden Mesa, the group tightened their formation and walked on, carrying grief, anger, hope, and the terrible unspoken knowledge that the next set of tracks might lead them straight into the jaws of death. By dusk, the desert heat had fallen into a cool, sharp wind that carried sand like tiny needles. From the top of a sandstone ridge, Colt and the 5 Apache women finally saw it. Fort Kestrel. It sat alone in the dying light, a half-ruined army outpost from decades ago. now stolen by the iron sabers and turned into a slaver's nest. Its stone walls were cracked but still tall, its towers burned black, its gate reinforced with stolen lumber and rusted iron. Torchlight flickered along the walls, revealing silhouettes of guards pacing lazily, too confident in the dead land surrounding them. Sayla spoke first, voice low and steady. "They're in there." Colt nodded grimly. He'd seen forts like this before. Ugly from the outside, uglier once you stepped inside. "We can't go in fast," he said. "We'll be outnumbered 10-1. Nala spit into the sand. "We don't need fast. We need in." Colt drew a line in the dirt with his boot. 3 directions, 3 tasks. The 5 women leaned in. First, Colt pointed toward the front gate. "We set off a blast. Enough noise to pull the guards forward." Sayla raised a brow. "You know how to make fire shout that loud?" Colt nodded. "Army taught me one useful thing." "Second," he continued, "Lyra and Nala climb the back wall. Quiet. Take out the high guards before anyone knows we're here." Lyra's fingers brushed the feathers of her arrows. "Done." Nala cracked her knuckles. "I'll make sure the dead don't scream." "Third," Colt said, "I go in through the drainage trench under the east tower. The holding cells are beneath it. I'll break the locks." Sayla studied him long enough for the wind to shift twice. "You know the fort well." Colt didn't look away. "I know every place guilt can hide." She nodded once. Agreement, warning, and trustless acceptance all at once. The plan was set. The night thickened into a velvet black. Clouds drifted across the moon, giving them pockets of shadow to slip through. The air tasted of iron and dust. Colt planted the powder charge near the front gate, a small canvas bag packed with enough compressed gunpowder to wake the dead. He lit the fuse, then sprinted back behind a rock formation. 5 seconds. 4. 3. A roar ripped through the desert, shaking the ground beneath them. Flames shot up in a wild burst. The guards panicked, shouting over one another as they rushed toward the gate, rifles raised. Perfect. On the far side of the fort, Lyra and Nala moved like shadows. Lyra scaled the stone first, finding footholds a normal person would never notice. She reached the top and pulled Nala up behind her. A guard turned, opening his mouth to shout. Lyra's arrow punched into his throat before the sound could escape. Another guard lunged, but Nala seized him from behind, snapped his neck clean, and lowered his body without a sound. The tower was theirs. Sayla, Amitsa, and Tayona waited below, poised like coiled springs. Colt crawled through the drainage trench, hands sinking into cold mud. The stench of mold and rust filled the tight passage, but he pushed forward until he saw the sliver of orange torchlight leaking through the grate above. He peered inside. 15 small forms huddled together behind iron bars. Dirty, bruised, shaking, but alive. Little faces streaked with tears, little hands gripping each other for courage. Colt's chest tightened. He pushed the grate aside and dropped into the cell room. A guard stepped forward, saying, "Who the hell?" Colt slammed the butt of his rifle into the man's jaw, sending him crumpling to the floor. He went to the children, voice low but steady. "You're safe now. Stay behind me." He smashed the lock with the guard's dropped pistol. The metal clanged and split. Tayona's cry of relief echoed in from the hall. "Connie!" Her little boy ran into her arms, sobbing into her chest. The scene nearly broke Colt's heart clean in two. Sayla and Amitsa ushered the children toward the exit. Gunfire erupted in the courtyard. Smoke billowed. Sand whipped through the flames as Lyra rained arrows from above, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Nala fought with bare hands, throwing, flipping, breaking bones faster than the slavers could reload. Colt cleared the last hallway, grabbing 2 children under his arms, pushing them forward. "Move! Don't stop!" In a war, the 15 children spilled out of the fort into the night air, frightened but free. Sayla looked back into the flames. "We have them all." Amitsa nodded. Tayona clutched her son. Lyra and Nala regrouped, breathless, streaked with blood. Then, hoofbeats, not near, far, but coming fast. Dozens of them. The iron sabers were returning. Colt's face hardened. "This isn't over." Sayla gripped her spear. "No," she said, eyes blazing. "Now it begins." Through the desert night broke open with the thunder of hooves. The sound rose from the darkness like a storm rolling straight out of hell. Fast, brutal, hungry. The 15 freed children clung to the Apache women as the echo grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Colt knew that sound. He had lived under it once. The iron sabers were coming home. Selah tightened her grip on her spear. Nala and Lyra formed a barrier in front of the children, shoulders squared, eyes burning with resolve. Emitsa pulled Tayona and the youngest kids behind the cover of a boulder. Colt positioned himself at the front, rifle raised, breath sharp. Torchlight flickered across the ridge. Silhouettes appeared, men on horseback, rifles gleaming, dust clouds swirling behind them. At their center rode a tall figure in a black duster coat, the coat flapping like wings behind him. Garrick Vale, the butcher of Black Mesa, the devil Colt once served without knowing, and the man who threw him into a burning cabin and walked away while his screams filled the air. Now he was here again, leading a pack of killers with eyes lit by greed and vengeance. As the riders slowed to a halt, Garrick stepped forward on horseback, face lit by the wavering torch he held. His grin was jagged, gleaming with a cruelty only a lifetime of spilling innocent blood could forge. "Well, I'll be damned," Garrick drawled. "Thought you'd burned up nice and clean, Mercer. Yet here you are, standing with the Redskins like some kind of savior." He laughed, the sound hollow and sharp. "Tell me, how does it feel to betray your own kind?" Colt didn't lower his rifle. "You're the only kind I ever betrayed," he said, "and I'd do it again." Garrick let the silence stretch, enjoying every second. His eyes slid to the Apache women, then to the frightened children behind them. "Look at you," he sneered, "guarding them, protecting them. A man like you should know better. These people, they don't need saving. They need culling." Selah took one step forward, the firelight dancing across her hardened face. "Your time is finished, Garrick Vale." Garrick smirked. "Oh, I don't think so." He lifted his pistol, swift, deliberate. But he didn't aim at Colt. He aimed straight at Selah. For one heartbeat, the world stopped breathing. The hammer clicked back. The children screamed. Lyra reached for an arrow. Nala lunged. But Colt moved first. He threw himself in front of Selah just as Garrick fired. The gunshot cracked like lightning splitting the night sky. The impact hit Colt square in the chest, hard, hot, and shattering. His body jerked backward, crashing into Selah as the force of the bullet knocked the air from his lungs. Selah caught him before he could hit the ground. "Colt! What can I?" she cried, her voice raw, stripped of its warrior steel for the first time. Colt gasped, choking on the heat flooding his ribs. Blood bloomed across his shirt, spreading fast. Nala screamed in Apache and charged forward, but Selah grabbed her arm with a strength born from pure desperation. "Stay with him," Selah ordered, voice trembling. "Protect the children." The battlefield froze around them. Garrick laughed in triumph. "That's what you get for choosing them over your own people, Mercer." Colt's fingers twitched against Selah's arm. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy with pain. "You're my people," he whispered. Selah's breath caught. Her hands shook violently as she pressed against the bleeding wound, trying to hold his life in place with nothing but her bare palms. "Don't speak," she choked. "Save your strength." A single tear slid down her cheek, one she didn't have time to wipe away, one she had never allowed herself to shed before this moment. The desert wind carried it away like a confession stolen by the night. Colt's head leaned against her shoulder, breath shallow. "I owed a life," he whispered. Now we're even." "No," Selah whispered fiercely. "No, we are not done. You stay. Do you hear me? You stay." But Colt's eyes were dimming, unfocused, drifting. Behind them, the iron sabers dismounted, weapons drawn, forming a growing wall of steel and shadow. The wolves had returned, and the night was far from over. The desert wind rose like a living thing, pushing sand and swirling waves across the battlefield. The iron sabers tightened their line, weapons raised, torches whipping in the wind. Behind the boulders, the 15 children huddled together, crying softly. Colt lay bleeding in Selah's arms, breath thin, eyes drifting in and out. His shirt was soaked through with red. The night flickered around them, torchlight, dust, shadows circling like hungry spirits. Amitsa knelt beside him, face pale with fear, but her hands steady with purpose. "Lay him down," she told Sayela. Sayela did, gently, her fingers trembling. Amitsa dug into her pouch and pulled out a handful of red desert clay, sacred among the Apache. She mixed it with water from her canteen, forming a deep, rust-colored paste. She built a ring of small stones, whispering words older than forts, older than guns, words carried by their people from birth to passing. She lit a small flame inside the ring, the fire crackling with brittle desperation. "Ancestors," Amitsa murmured, voice catching in her throat. "Lend him strength. Let his spirit stay. Not for us, but for the innocent who need him." She pressed the warm clay over Colt's wound, chanting in a rising rhythm. The wind shifted. The fire flared pure white for a moment, a color no desert fire should ever hold. Then Colt gasped. His eyes opened, blurry, unfocused, but alive. Sayela bit her lip hard enough to draw blood. Relief flooded her face, raw and unguarded. She squeezed his hand. "You came back." Colt swallowed weakly. "Didn't finish the job yet." But there was no more time. A roar erupted as the iron sabers charged. Sayela rose first, spear in hand, her grief and fury burning hotter than the fire. "With me!" she shouted. The Apache women exploded into motion. Nala struck like a sandstorm unleashed. She barreled into the first saber, slamming her elbow into his throat before he could fire. She twisted, grabbed another by the vest, and hurled him into a rock. She moved with deadly grace, feral, unstoppable, a storm given flesh. Lyra perched atop a fallen beam and loosed arrow after arrow. Each one flew through the smoky darkness with lethal precision, dropping sabers before they even knew where death came from. Tayona, pale and trembling, shielded the children behind a rock wall. When a saber broke through the chaos and lunged toward them, she didn't hesitate. She swung a stone hard into his jaw, screaming with the last of her strength. The children clung to her legs. Amitsa moved in circles along the battlefield, flinging handfuls of sacred dust into the wind. The powder hit the sabers' eyes like burning ash, blinding them, choking them, turning their rifles into useless metal as they stumbled, cursing. The battle became smoke, sand, screams, and fire. Sayela cut through the chaos like a blade forged from the desert itself. Her spear caught torchlight as she spun, striking low, then high, then driving the tip into a saber's ribs. She roared as she fought, every strike fueled by the memory of 15 stolen children and the burning of Black Mesa. Garrick Vale watched from the far end of the battlefield, untouched, furious, his coat flapping like a vulture's wings. He spat, "Weak, all of you!" He lifted his pistol again, aiming for Sayela's back, but a hand seized his arm. Colt, barely able to stand, leaning on one knee, bleeding badly, but alive. Garrick stared, stunned for half a second. "You should be dead." Colt's voice was a growl torn from deep within. "Not yet." They grappled, Garrick swinging wildly, Colt blocking weakly but with a strength fueled by pure will. The pistol fired toward the sky. Garrick slammed Colt into the wall of the ruined fort. "You think you can stop me?" Garrick snarled. "You never could." Colt's vision blurred. He tasted blood. But then, he saw Sayela fighting through smoke. He saw the children huddled behind Tayona. He saw Black Mesa burning again in his mind. And something inside him snapped back into place. Colt pushed off the wall, driving Garrick backward, step by step, until Garrick's back hit stone. Colt raised the fallen torch, the flame hissing in the wind. "This time," Colt said, voice trembling but unbroken, "the fire won't save you." He thrust the torch forward. Garrick screamed as the flame caught his coat, then his shoulder, then everything. He dropped to his knees, writhing, until Lyra's arrow ended him clean. Silence fell. One by one, the remaining iron sabers dropped their weapons and fled into the night, chased by the desert wind. They were finished, all of them. The world felt quieter after the sabers fell. Not safer, not entirely, but quieter in a way the desert hadn't been for a very long time. The wind carried only sand and the smell of sagebrush again. No more gun smoke, no more screams buried under moonlight. At Mercer Ranch, dawn came soft and golden, spilling across the fields like warm honey. The barn doors hung open to let the morning breeze drift through, carrying the scent of hay and distant cedar. A few doves perched on the roof, cooing lazily. Inside the cabin, Colt Mercer lay propped against a stack of old quilts, his chest still wrapped in Amitsa's herbs and clay poultices. Every breath hurt, but every breath reminded him he was still here, still part of this land, still tied to these people fate had thrown into his path. 5 Apache women moved quietly around the small room, each taking a task without needing to speak. Amitsa checked the healing wound, her hands gentle, her eyes sharp with the calm certainty of a healer born from the desert's wisdom. Lyra was outside fletching new arrows, humming under her breath, a soft tune Colt had never heard before. Nala split firewood with the same ferocity she brought into battle, except now her jaw was looser, her eyes softer. Tayona was near the corral teaching her son Connie how to feed Colt's horse sugar cubes without losing a finger. And Sila sat beside Colt, tying a fresh band around his ribs with careful, deliberate hands. "You should be resting," Colt muttered, wincing slightly. Sila's lips curved into the smallest shadow of a smile. "And you should be quiet." Her tone wasn't cold, not like before. There was a warmth beneath it, something unspoken but real. Colt let out a breath that shook a little. "Never thought I'd see something like this," he said. "What?" Sila asked without looking up. "Children," Colt said. "Running, laughing, on my land." And outside, that's exactly what was happening. 15 Apache children, once stolen, trembling, terrified, now raced through the open field chasing each other between the sage bushes. Their laughter rang across the valley like water over stone. The sound softened something deep inside Colt's chest. Tayona watched her boy run with the others, tears slipping down her cheeks without shame. Lyra leaned on her bow with an amused smirk. Even Nala paused mid-swing to watch the scene, her expression softening in a way Colt had never imagined possible. Sela followed his gaze. For the first time since the night Colt met her, her eyes weren't hard or guarded or burning with grief. They were simply peaceful. She rose and stepped outside. Colt pushed himself upright and followed her slowly, holding the wall for support. The porch boards creaked beneath his feet as he joined her in the cool morning air. Sela stood at the edge of the porch, arms folded, watching the sunrise paint the sky in bands of gold and crimson. After a long silence, she spoke. "This land feels like it remembers us." Colt looked at her, really looked at her, the warrior, the sister, the survivor, and now somehow, the woman who'd chosen to stay by his fire. "Then let's build something worth remembering," he said, voice steady. Sela turned toward him, and the morning light struck her face just right, softening her features, brightening her eyes. She nodded once, solemn and sure. "Morning, Mesa," she said. Colt blinked. "What's that?" Sela gestured to the ranch, the open field, the horizon stretching without end. "This place, this home, that's what we'll call it. Morning Mesa. A land not built by bloodshed, but rebuilt after it. Not family by birth, but family by the scars they carried and the children they saved." Amitsa joined them on the porch, then Nala, then Lyra, then Tayona with Connie in her arms. The 15 children gathered around, giggling as the sun warmed their faces. Colt stood in the center of them all, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. What once was a lonely, half-forgotten ranch had become something else entirely. A sanctuary, a beginning, a promise to the land and to each other. A new family not bound by blood, but by survival, sorrow, and the stubborn hope that tomorrow could be better. Morning Mesa was born, and now a question for you, the audience. If you were Colt, scarred by the past but given a second chance, would you choose to build a new life alongside the very people who once reminded you of your deepest sins?